Welcome to the Barren Not Broken podcast. I am your host, BonnieRuth, and the co-founder with my husband, Jason, of Legacy Place Retreats. It's a ministry focused on equipping and encouraging couples who are navigating the many difficulties of infertility, miscarriage, baby loss, or childlessness not by choice. This podcast is just one of the many resources that we offer to help come alongside these couples to encourage them to step forward together in hope as they are defining their legacy. Every episode will be sharing inspiring and inspirational stories of other couples or individuals who have walked similar journeys. We will host a new episode the second Wednesday of every month. We want you to be reminded and inspired that no matter the barren places in your life, you do not have to live broken. Hi, I'm BonnieRuth with Barren Not Broken, your host, and I'm so excited to have you with us today. We have special guests Mark and Rachel, and we cannot wait for you to, one, hear their story, but also for them to share some nuggets and truths and things that might help us inspire us in our own stories. Because as we know, no matter the barren places in our lives, we do not have to live broken. So thank you, Mark and Rachel, for being with us today. We're so excited to have you, and we just want to hear a little bit about you. Tell us about yourselves.
Sure. I'm Rachel. I'm the founder of Hope Again Collective, a handmade jewelry line that shares the stories of women who've walked through pregnancy and infant loss. And I started that out of the ache of our own story. Our entrance into parenthood began with loss. We lost our first baby to miscarriage just before 8 weeks. And so navigating so many things, faith, parenthood, motherhood, just asking God a lot of really big questions for the first time. All of that was marked by that loss. And so it's really been, especially for me, I think a pivotal moment in my story. And it's changed so much of how I view life and all those things I just mentioned. So that's kind of what's led us to this place. I wrote Miscarried Hope about 1.5 years ago. And I'm sure I'll bring that up at some point too, just to share some of the things I've learned working with other women that led me to that journey. And this is my awesome other half, Mark.
Yeah, my name's Mark, and pastor together with Rachel. I'm the lead pastor of the Bridge Church in Chino, which is a suburb 45 miles inland from Los Angeles in California. And just happy to be here to participate and to share whatever wisdom or experience I have, probably specifically from a pastoral and a personal perspective at the same time.
Well, it's so good to hear about your church. Tell us about just kind of your journey, and what people may not understand is that being a pastor and being in people's lives pretty consistently, sometimes people have the false notion that you deal with pain or loss in some supernatural way that you don't have to carry like other people do. You just kind of keep moving on about your life. Would you say that there's definitely something there that people might need to know about, both serving in a ministry role and helping people at the same time while you're suffering your own difficult circumstances?
Yeah. I think what you just said is exactly correct. I think probably most people have, and I don't mean this in an elitist way, but they just have no idea what it means to be a pastor in terms of your own personal life. And so, I think there is an exalted perspective that we have everything figured out. We know how to handle things. Everything's good. And so, something tragic happens. Well, we can handle it. We know what we're doing. We know the right stuff to pray or the right things to read, etc. And that is completely not true. So we are just obviously normal people, just like everyone else. I think maybe the other element that's probably even a little bit more trickier is, as a pastor, whether it's going through infant loss, miscarriage, or any other type of tragedy for that matter, how much of that do you share? And that has nothing to do with not wanting to be transparent or vulnerable. Of course we do. But, there's a time and a place from everything. And because you're, quote unquote, more of a public figure, you kind of have to pick and choose when it's appropriate, when it's not, when it's helpful, when it's not. And I would say that's actually, from a pastoral perspective, maybe a little bit more of the trickier part.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's backtrack a little bit. If you guys don't mind sharing with us just that first moment of loss and how you guys navigated that individually and together. And I know that's a big question. It might take a few minutes to get through, but I really want to give people context to your story, but also just kind of how, like, you faced this loss. Now what? So take us through kind of that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I'll share from my perspective. Our loss happened on a Sunday morning. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was early on a Sunday morning. That's a big work day for us. That starts our work week. And thankfully, I think just in God's provision, neither one of us were preaching that morning.
Wow.
Thankfully, we had our friends scheduled to come in. Um, so yeah, that was an interesting element to me. That sort of I feel like juxtaposed these realities like very loudly, and that kind of colored the next 6 months, at least for me. It was walking this tension of how do I grieve this loss while processing my own faith. I
Right.
really wrestled with, for the first time, understanding God's goodness not attached to circumstances, and how is God good when he allows hard, bad things to happen? Not that he causes it, but
Yeah.
there was still an element of allowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have wrestled with those things like, kind of like helping other people through it, but it was mostly head knowledge, and it hadn't really touched my life. Like, I'd been through hard things before, but there's something about losing your own child
Yes.
that it just made me wrestle with all of that on such a much deeper, more personal level. And I really spent the next like probably 5 to 6 months sifting through all of that.
Yeah.
And and it was hard to show up and pastor and help people through their own stuff at the same time. I mean, you still know like how to help guide them. But I remember walking a young teenage mom through, she was faced with not sure if she wanted to keep a pregnancy. And she came to me, and that was like my first week back after our loss.
Wow.
And I just remember thinking like, I mean, wow, God, seriously? Like, okay. And that's just the messy world of
Yeah.
pastoring, I think. And I mean, it's just the brokenness of all of our stuff. But
Exactly.
yeah, so it was a very refining, wrestling period for me. I'm not sure. Mark seemed to like be able to compartmentalize a little better than I could at that
Yeah.
time.
Well, we can shove our things in boxes and look like we're okay. We're
Yeah.
pros at doing that. Doesn't mean we necessarily are okay. I would imagine Mark probably has some of these similarities.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think my reaction and state of mind was probably what most males feel in that situation. Not all. There's always exceptions and nuances.
Right.
And that's not to say that obviously I was affected by it and saddened and every other adjective you could think of. With that said, though, I wasn't as emotionally affected as Rachel.
Yeah.
And so, and I think from what we hear, especially as I talk to other guys sometimes about stuff like this, that seems to be common to me. Again, not always the case, but is often the case.
Yeah.
And so I think then the guy kind of is in this weird spot of, hey, they know this is tragic. They know this is sad. They know this isn't supposed to happen. And they feel for their wife. I mean, they're right there. But they literally, in that case, don't have the physical reaction, much less than the accompanying emotional one. And so I think for me, then the unique spot was, in some respects, having to pastor myself and then attempt to pastor Rachel in the sense of like, what do I say? How do I comfort her? How do I sympathize, right? And try to enter into her world emotionally, while at the same time, I'm affected too, but in a different way, or maybe to a different degree. And so that was very, 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 very unique. And I found that as I talked to other guys about this, the conversation often shifts to, hey, how can you best empathize with your wife? How can you enter into what she is feeling? and help her process because she needs that.
Yeah.
While at the same time dealing with whatever you're dealing in the situation as well.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what you're saying, and I'm kind of the person that gets nuggets dropped in while people are talking. People are coming to you with their same level of needs, burdens. Hey, I need help with this. Talk to me about this. While you're trying to lead, pastor each other first and foremost, and then them. I mean, that's a lot of weight and a consistency of that while you're trying to
Heal.
walk through and
Yeah.
heal through something that I think, whether as men, how much it impacts us on a different level, we still are walking with our wives going, wow, this is a big thing. This is not something you just, in our society, I don't know that we give it the space and time for people to actually go, it's okay to see this as a tragedy, see this as a loss, to have a grieving stage, because we hear so much in the world today that it's just a clump of cells, it's just a fetus, there's these names that take it away from life. It's just this. So what's so hard for you to get over? So what's interesting to me is I would love to hear, how did you guys stay a team in the fact that you got the whole world coming saying, hey, we still need help us. And what people can't see is you're walking around with a broken leg. You've got something that's hurting hard that you're dealing with. And yet the next week, the girl still has a situation. Yes, God does amazing things and that's beautiful, but you're still having to carry that. How did you guys do that as a team?
Yeah, that was one of the first times that we really had to walk through that in our marriage together. As we only been married about 2 years when we experienced our loss. But we've always worked together. So I remember one day in the kitchen just needing to get really honest with Mark and say, hey, I need you to ask me, can you ask me every 2 weeks how I'm doing, what I'm struggling with? Can you share how you're feeling about our loss? And I gave him like 4 or 5 very basic questions to be like, we need to have these check-in questions, because from my perspective, my mind is constantly swirling and processing this, and I'm seeing a therapist to help me with this, and I feel like I'm drowning because of this. And from my perspective, you look like you're able to carry on with life fairly well, and you're not affected
That would be
to the
hard.
same level.
Yeah.
Which is now just adding another layer to me, like, why am I struggling so much?
Yeah.
Am I taking too long? Like, you start to get in your head about all of that. And you hear it a lot when it comes to relationships. Like, we can't expect our partner to be our mind reader.
I think that's so good, Rachel. Wow.
Yeah, and so that was
a good nugget you just dropped. I hope people caught it.
What are those questions? What are the things, if you remember,
Yeah.
kind of 1 or 2 of the things that you had that you asked?
Yeah, I said, I just need you to ask me, every 2 weeks or whatever, how are you doing with this? What are you struggling with most? Can you share with me how you're feeling? What's going on in your mind that you're not vocalizing in our day-to-day? I mean, it's just really simple, basic, like a how are you check-in? How are you with God? How are you with our loss? What do you need most from me right now? And that was so helpful to us. And that's not the first time that we've had to do that. And to speak earlier, you referenced, Jason, kind of the pastoral challenge of, I mean, you're always leading with a limp. I would say we've done this. We've been in many seasons of we're aching and hurting and walking through loss or a challenge at home while still carrying the leading weight and people coming to us and tending to their pains and burdens. And I think that's constantly our biggest invitation from God, into reliance on him and to figure out how we receive in our personal and private spaces so that we're able to pour out. And we still don't have it figured out, but every time you walk through that, you learn and you grow.
Yeah. What would be I think about what you're saying, it's really powerful. What would be something you would have wanted people to say to you, or what you would have wanted to hear? Because we pastored for over 20 years. People say a lot of dumb things at the very wrong time. And one example
They
of that,
mean well sometimes.
they mean well, I won't give all the
You said
examples.
sometimes.
I say a lot of times, but what would you have liked to hear from someone at that moment? Like just something simple. What would have helped you in that time?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, at that moment, I think, just to be super practical,
Yeah, that's good.
less is more.
Yes.
So it could be, this just all depends upon church size. Now I'm
Right.
speaking exclusively from a pastoral perspective. So I don't know
Right.
how relatable this is. But if you're at a large church, you could have a lot of people come up to you after the service, right? Now, if you're at a smaller church, then, this isn't necessarily the case. But it's like, rather than coming up to them in person and talking, maybe just write them a note, or you send them an email saying,
Yeah.
hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm with you. Please let me know if there's anything you need. I would love to bring you dinner, drop it off at your doorstep. I think in some ways that stuff's far more helpful in the short term, in the moment, than like, pour out to your soul to me right now. And, because you don't want to do that.
Let's have a theological discussion about how your baby's
Yeah.
or
So,
something. Like you're like, I'd like you to send me a meal. That's it.
I
We
think
can leave
that's
it
good
there.
yeah,
work because that's applicable whether you're pastors or not. Like, I think that
right.
advice right there is very transferable to no matter where you are in your season of journey or loss, or, what your occupation is. Like, that's so practical and very real and needed. Because I
Mhm.
think sometimes people do say dumb things when they just don't know. And so I think that's really helpful. Like, just practical. Like, hey, less is more. Like, that's so good. That's so
Yeah.
good.
I think also some of that, not to get too like psychological maybe, but, I just thought of all of this. I'd be curious if you guys have ventured into it or not, is also like personality based, right? So whether someone's an introvert or an extrovert is also going to determine and shape,
That's good.
Yeah.
um, maybe the best way to approach them to express and process grief.
It's very good.
Maybe they would just want to journal about it. They don't want to talk about it. But then I know people from pastoring where the best thing that can happen is for someone to sit next to them, to talk to them and ask them questions. And that's how they process their grief. Right. So, man, even just knowing someone's personality and what they prefer, maybe that's the best way. Hey,
Yeah.
so-and-so, what would be the best way that I could help you process grief? Would it be just to spend time with you, or to send you a meal?
That's
Then
good.
you're giving them options.
Mhm.
What's the best way I can help you process
Yeah,
grief?
that
That's
that
awesome.
that that
Yeah.
that might be
Man,
good.
that should be a shirt stapled somewhere.
Well,
What's the best way I can help you process?
I also think that that's a gauge that we should use as people. What is our equity with this person to
Yeah,
even be approaching this? So if they don't even know, if we don't know the personality of the person, we probably shouldn't be engaging it on a deep level in the first place. And if you do know the personality of a person, then take a step back before you engage them and figure out, like, hey, what would an introvert need? What would an extrovert need? We're both extroverts, very strong personalities. So, like, anyone can approach us with anything, but they also should probably be ready that we're going to be honest of where we are and what
sure.
we need. But some people can't do that, and especially in loss and grief, it does, like, personality comes into play, but also everything is altering on the inside of us emotionally and personality wise in the moment because of what we're experiencing. So I hope people will take what you said practically, but also to help them think, like, hey, do I know this person well enough to engage this, whether it's your pastors or your friends or your sister-in-law or someone that a coworker that you talk with maybe an hour a day. What is our level of connection so that I can step into that in the appropriate manner? I do want to go back to something that Rachel said real quick. When you were sharing, those 5 questions to Mark, I think one thing that I really hope listeners will pick up, and that's how you close the communication gap. Because what happens is when we have loss, and we are going to experience that very differently. I mean, Jason and I did, it was honestly a few years before Jason even was like aware of how he felt and fully. And it wasn't that he wasn't engaging me, it wasn't that we weren't caring for each other, but just like that deep part of him. And so I come back to it because I think what happens is the division happens. 50% of couples who are navigating infertility or miscarriage are divorcing, and 1 out of 6 are experiencing this. And so that's a lot. That's a lot of percentage that we really hope in these kinds of conversations that we can minimize, and we can build stronger, healthier marriages as we face it ourselves, and then as we help other people. So in that, Rachel, what you're saying is so practical, but it's actually such a deep nugget that if people will engage something like that in their own personalities, within their own rhythm of their marriage, it's going to help them to keep things from going into assumptions,
Right.
from going into those places that we shove under the rug, we don't deal with, and then disunity and disruption, and even sometimes like frustration and resentment can come in. And that simple thing closes that gap. So thank you for sharing that.
Totally.
I was going to say, did you have something?
Yeah. That's not, well, at least from my experience, that's never going to be the easiest, most natural, like, first
No.
reaction.
No.
I mean,
Be nice if it was.
I probably sat in like frustration first, which turned to, why doesn't he understand what I need?
Yep.
Resentment of like, why is this affecting me so much more? And you're just sitting in all those emotions. You're letting them build because you're not vocalizing any of them.
Yes.
And then, it took me a few weeks to get to like, oh, light bulb, I should just ask for what I need. What a crazy concept.
Yeah.
And it's really just a relational principle. Like, how many times can we employ that? And I'm glad that it felt awkward at first. I will say that, because it feels awkward to be so, at least when you're early on, I guess, in a marriage, that honest about what you need.
Yeah.
And just say, because you want the other person to know. You walk around with this unspoken assumption, like they're going to know exactly what I need.
Right.
And they're going to swoop in and rescue me from all of my inner turmoil without them even knowing.
So is that a common wife thing I'm hearing?
It's definitely, I've been there. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, so it's not going to feel like your first response. It's not going to feel natural. But I think, especially what you're getting to, BonnieRuth, is like, that is such an easy window for the enemy to come in and just cause that door to open more and more and more until there's this big wedge between you, and your husband might be on the other side of it, like, wait, I didn't even know something was wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, that's been a helpful skill for us to build, is just become more honest about asking, hey, this is what I need. It's going to feel forced, but I need you to start this conversation with me.
Yeah.
I love it. I've heard, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Be honest. Be open. I love that you're saying, at least from, and I can't speak for all men, we don't speak for each other all the time, but there are some similarities in, we don't know what you're thinking until you say it out loud, and then we can act on that. I think that would be something I'd love to hear from Mark. What for you, hearing that, what did it do for you? Like, how did it help you in that process?
Yeah, that's good.
A couple things. Maybe force me or nudge me to ask her those questions. I mean, that's kind of like a duh, but that's important. And maybe the other thing that I just thought of is also the role of self-awareness in this, in that, self-awareness, most people just aren't self-aware. Like the healthiest people are self-aware, and the unhealthiest people are not self-aware. And so being self-aware of how I process tragedy or emotions, all that kind of stuff in this, once I understand that and I see that clearly, that then enables me to meet Rachel where she's at and what she needs, because I'm completely aware of, I'm not processing this, or I'm just so rational, or I'm so analytical that I'm able to compartmentalize that, but that's not the way she's wired. And so I need to make sure that I'm meeting her where she's at.
Yes.
That is almost a big light bulb in and of itself, that has to do with just honestly a basic self-awareness with, here's how I'm wired, here's how I process. She's not wired that way. Therefore, I need to go the extra mile and out of my own comfort zone to partner with her with where she's at.
Yeah. So as hard as this, man, you say some really good stuff. I don't know if this is how you preach, but if you're just talking to people, it's fantastic. So would you say that through this experience, it helped rewire, as hard as it was, for you guys in your communication, how you saw each other, being more self-aware? Would you say it affected that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, as with some other things we said, I mean, there's just a lot of carryover to other areas of life, right? I mean, whenever you go through tough things, you can respond in one of two ways. They can either refine you or they can break you apart.
Yeah,
And I mean, you gave the statistics that would lead to, this topic breaks people apart.
Mhm.
But the other option available, and it's a harder option, but it's the better option,
Yes.
would be for it to bring you closer together and to refine and strengthen your relationship.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's so good.
So maybe that's another needed perspective, is that, hey, we have this tragic thing that's happened that we can't change.
Yes.
And this is devastating. This can break us or it can make us.
Yeah.
I
Right,
think
and
it
That's
sounds
you
like
make that
everybody would hit that road. That sounds fantastic. Like anybody who's dealing with this is going to come to that road sign going,
Yeah.
you
right.
can either let this break you right now,
Yeah.
or you can let this take you further and stronger together. And you're going to have to make that choice at some point.
Mhm.
And if you don't, the default sounds like it's probably going to break you,
Yeah.
because what happens? Miscommunication, no
Yeah.
understanding of each other's feelings, no self-awareness. So that's really good. You're coming to that sign and going, hey, you're going to have to choose one.
Yeah. And that's going to
Yeah,
happen no matter what we're facing in life, like you said, Mark. And I think Rachel also referenced that too, of like, life happens in our journeys. And, the one thing that I hear consistent with you guys is just that communication piece, but it's not easy. Like, we're not going to pretend and sit here that the four of us just navigated that perfectly. Like, there's mess ups, there's times that we hurt each other when we didn't mean to. I mean, this week, like we're going through something and we had like we hurt each other but we didn't mean to, like
Mhm.
especially not in some when you're already in tragedy or pain. And so it's just real that you're gonna do that. You're gonna mess up. You're not gonna do it perfectly. It's gonna be awkward. I mean, we say all the time, like, these are hard conversations because they're hard.
Mhm.
And they're not fun, but they're so worth it. And so I'd love to just hear from each of you, like a moment or a story or a revelation where it's like, this is worth it. Like, it's worth it to have this awkward conversation. It's worth it to close those communication gaps and to connect.
Yeah, definitely. I remember reading in Pete Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Spirituality books, and his whole series is fantastic. There's a chapter on grief, and yeah, it basically says like you're gonna have a choice in grief, and I think we don't want to have to make any choices in life, but especially in grief, because
Especially,
you're
yeah.
wounded. But he says, think of grief like a balloon. It is either going to enlarge your soul or it's going to shrink and harden your soul, like the oxygen's taken. And we kind of already alluded to that fork in the
so
road,
good.
like Jason was saying. And we, pastoring, have seen people make both of those choices. And we've seen the ramifications to their faith, to their relationships. And you see that walked out, lived out, and then it hits you and you're like, oh, I have to make that choice now. And it's usually not the easy choice. And you're right, it's not the default choice that's going to lead you to grow through your grief. Because naturally, I think if we just sit in it, we don't do anything, we take a more passive route, like cynicism and all that hardening of the soul is going to creep in. And so for me, it was kind of seeing that image and being like, oh, wow. I mean, I kind of naturally, um, I'm an achiever. I'm an Enneagram 3. We both are. And so, I was already putting the work in and like, yeah, this isn't going to define me. I know I kind of had that like, no, I'm not going to let this win attitude. And so I was already thankfully laying some foundational work, and therapy was so helpful. But yeah, once I got that imagery from reading Scazzero's piece on grief, I was like, wow, yeah, I want to see and it's so hard, but I want to see the pain points in our story as invitations from Jesus.
That's good.
And
That's really
it's
good.
hard to get there. And it's never comfortable, never easy. But in every type of loss, pain, grief, sorrow we walk through,
Yeah.
it's an invitation for us to become more like Jesus and our souls to
That's
be
so
enlarged.
good.
Yeah.
Wow, just great thoughts. What about you, Mark? Anything that you can think of?
I don't know if I would add anything to that.
It was pretty good. That was mic drop worthy. So
It's
yeah,
it's great. When you have
Wow.
a spouse like that, you're like, yeah, I'm just here for background. I'm just here to smile and look good. It's the
Well,
best
back
I
to
possible.
want to
once
shift
more.
the conversation a little bit to the book. And I'm going to start with one of my favorite parts that I was just like, wow, this was brilliant. And it's a letter to our loved ones. And you basically write a letter. Did you give the letter? That was one thing I didn't. Did you give the? Okay.
No.
Well, obviously you did now, but I just thought, and I want to encourage people to get this if you've experienced a miscarriage. This book is so authentic and incredibly, it directs people to hope, like literally. But it's also being so real and transparent. And
Well, where can they find the resource, by the way?
tell us that real quick before I go into my
Absolutely.
little.
It's available anywhere that you would look for books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Baker Books, if you want to buy multiple copies and get a nice discount. But yeah, Amazon's probably going to be your best bet.
Awesome.
So this was just really powerful. So I'm not going to read the letter because I really want people to go get the book. Like,
Give you a teaser of
it's-
the letter.
and also, can I just say this? Your chapter titles are brilliant. Like, I was like, wow. And knowing, your miscarriage happened on a Sunday, like when people read that, obviously there's that clarity. But these chapters, like just the titles, I was like, that's really good. Like it's poignant. And so I want to have you just share like when you decided to write this and put your whole, I mean, because you were talking, Mark, earlier about how, like, what do you share? Like, how do you put yourself out there? But you've done that so vulnerably and such a resource to help people, to help women walk through something that we don't always have the words to describe, especially in our culture today. There isn't a lot of people allowing or giving space for there to be an actual like space and moment. Like this is something that happened and it deserves a moment in time in our lives to define. And we honestly, like I've probably done this to people and I've experienced it where in our faith communities, we do not allow people the space because we don't want them to be sad or to question. And so I really just want to have you share like writing this book as a pastor, but also someone who's experienced it. How do you encourage people to give it a space, like give it moment in their own way? Maybe they don't write a book, but how do they give it space in their own way?
Yeah, totally. I will say that sometimes there tends to be this immediacy of like, oh, I went through this big thing. I have to do something big now. And I understand that impulse. We want some sort of release, something that's cathartic or that can serve as memorial. But for me, I didn't plan it this way, but my timeline was a lot longer than I thought it would be. And I didn't set out to write a book on this topic. And it just unfolded naturally. But I think what's been so helpful in being able to be vulnerable, be transparent, is I had the perspective of time.
That's good.
So I wrote this book about 4 years after my loss. So it wasn't fresh on the heels of it.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel like, oh, I've missed out. I've missed the moment. But man, God deepened the work that he had started in me as time went on, as I sat with more women and observed common themes in the way that we're processing loss, observed the common lacks that our society has when it comes to even language, like you were saying earlier, Jason, naming this as life and how that changes the way we grieve. Really, the timeline thing was so key, I think. And I didn't plan it that way.
Yeah.
That was just, God's sovereignty in that. But creating that moment, it can be something like writing a book. It can be also something as significant as like writing a letter to your baby. Maybe it's each year that would be the birth date of your child. Whatever allows, again, going back to your personality, your wiring, how you express, whatever allows you to give space to your feelings, because we don't do that naturally.
Yeah.
Pick a way do something to honor this piece of your story, to honor your child. And that's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
I think what you shared too, it for me, it definitely applies to men as well. I think what we try to do is say this is definitely a we thing that was experienced and what we're walking through. And I think that's life. I think that's the beauty of God's image from man and wife to say this represents me, not this represents me and this does, but this does.
Mhm.
And so for me, I had the same thing. I had to learn to give moments of where I thought about the child I could have had or what that child may be doing. I don't know how it all works, if I'm honest. I don't know the mysteries of life, but I do know that there are times where God will speak to me and say, I'm with you. I was with you in that moment. I'm with that child now. I'm putting all this together. I'm weaving the story together. And no, I don't understand it all. And I think you were very wise to let time take some of its course to be able to give that back to people.
Yeah.
But what you're saying right in the moment, when it happened for you, you were still speaking, you were writing things down, you were giving points of exploration of what you're feeling out in the world. And maybe not the best thing that we've all learned to do these days is to put your whole life out on social media. Maybe it's not the time to just go express all your anger and thoughts in a public forum, but maybe in a private way, write some things down, take some photos, go to places that help you experience God in those moments so that you can process that. And maybe at some point in time, now you're able to take someone else on that journey. Maybe you help people write those notes. Maybe you help people go to places that help them feel connected to God and struggle through that grief and turmoil. So I thought that was really good.
So as we kind of wrap up, because I want to honor y'all's time today, what would be something that each of you would encourage a couple? Let's do two things. One, if it's just recent, their loss is recent, or if they're, years down the road, but that's still a reality of their story.
Well, and can I do it in a Chat GPT prompt way? If this makes, do you guys use Chat GPT?
Yeah.
So,
What are you going to say right now?
I'm going to give you a prompt because I think this is powerful because you're both your authenticity comes across online and the way you love people. So I would love it is if you look into the camera, the prompt is you're speaking to the couple right now. Like if it's not us, we're not going through it right now, but if there's a couple going through it or an individual, a young lady that's, hasn't got her husband on board, is struggling, trying to figure out how to have the words or have the conversation. Could you speak to them as you share this final thought as though you're speaking directly to that audience? Does that make sense?
Yes, I just got a lot harder, Jason.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
They're like, who's going to go first?
Yeah. Journal right now. Journal right now. Write down your thoughts, whatever they may be, good, bad, whatever. Write them down. That's going to help you now and in the moment. And then it will help you in the long term as well.
Yeah.
And then secondly, for the long term, years later, as you look back at that moment, and I've learned this from Rachel, is to set aside, it's usually on like the anniversary or something of that nature, right? But to carve out time and space on a day of significance to remember that moment. So journal right now, and then in the long run, every year, make a habit and a rhythm of going back to intentionally remember and reflect.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I'll just carry on the theme of how we started this conversation in terms of how you're doing that together with your spouse. It may require prompting. And I remember our first year, I knew that was going to be really important to me, that we do something on the due date, that we do something on the anniversary of the passing. And those dates weren't really on Mark's radar. And so I had to talk to him about that. Hey, on this day, can we take a half day off? Can we go to breakfast? We did breakfast on our due date. Put him in the calendar for the year to follow. And kind of remove the mystery of, are they going to know? Are they going to come through? Are they going to remember? Which really is just setting yourself up to potentially be hurt or to cause some division. And we can't expect our spouse to be our mind reader and to know what we need. And so I know how I'm wired. If you know how you're wired, say, hey, this is what I'm going to need. Here's what I want us to do.
Yeah.
When the first holidays hit, here's what I want to do for Mother's Day. What would you like to do for Father's Day?
Children.
So
Yeah.
kind of setting up those conversations around key dates and just having the courage to have them, and knowing that even if it feels awkward right now, it's going to be so helpful and healthy, really, for your relationship, for your own personal healing. And then lastly, for the way that you together remember the life of your child. Keep in mind that you and your spouse want the same thing. You
Yeah.
want healing, you want to grow closer with Jesus,
Yeah.
and you want your baby's life to matter and to be
Yeah.
remembered. And so you're going to arrive there in different ways. You're going to take different routes to get there, but you want the same thing. If you
That's
can
so
keep
good.
that in the foreground, that's going to be so helpful to see the
Yeah.
other person as a co-pilot on your journey and not as someone who's against you.
That's so good. Thank you guys so much. I'm so honored, and I really hope there was some power-packed things in this conversation that both practical but also to the depths of our soul that we can take in, and I do hope the listeners will do that. Rachel, will you tell us just one more time where they can get connected with Hope Collective? We know where they can get the book, but I want you to be able to share how can they connect with that, because it's a beautiful organization that you've created.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with you guys more at hopeagaincollective.com or on Instagram at hopeagaincollective. I have Miscarried Hope, my book, linked there, as well as on Amazon. And if this conversation really resonated with you, chapter 8 of my book was written by Mark. I really wanted to have
Yeah, that's right. It
um,
was.
a husband's perspective in there and not me talking about my husband's perspective. I said, will you just write this chapter?
Yeah.
And he did a phenomenal job. And I've learned a lot from his processing through reading the words that he's written. And I really think it can be a helpful tool to understand. Maybe if you're a wife and you're listening to this, you want more insight into how your husband grieves. Maybe it can be a springboard into conversation if you
Yes.
read the book
really good.
together.
Yeah,
that
that's
topic
good.
together. So
Well, thank
Yeah,
you
we'll just
so
need to
much. You
connect.
guys are amazing. Thank you for being with us at Barren Not Broken today. Again, no matter the barren places in our lives, we don't have to live broken. And I really hope that today you were able to experience some things that will help your heart heal and where you will move forward together in hope.